Most of what we think we know about the Bible comes from tradition, not from the text itself. But there's something older than tradition. There's evidence. Archaeology doesn't work the way most people imagine. It doesn't exist to prove the Bible or disprove it. What archaeology actually does is show you how the world described in those ancient pages fits with what we can touch, measure, and verify in the ground. And that's where things get interesting. When you stand in the ruins of cities that haven't been occupied in 2,000 years, when you hold fragments of manuscripts that survived longer than any empire, when you see the exact tools and vessels that existed during the time of Christ, something shifts. The Bible stops feeling like myth. It feels like memory. In a minute, I'm going to show you why so many people who've studied this evidence end up changing how they read Scripture entirely. But the last part changes everything about how you understand what's actually written. Think about that for a second. If the places were real, if the people were documented, if the artifacts match the accounts, what does that mean for the words you've been reading? Most people never ask that question. Now here's the twist. The Dead Sea Scrolls almost didn't exist at all. A shepherd boy in 1947 chased a goat near cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea, in what's now the West Bank. He threw a stone into a cave. Instead of hearing it land, he heard pottery shatter. That sound led to the discovery of ancient manuscripts hidden in caves for nearly 2,000 years. The climate there is perfect for preservation. Dry, salty, stable, parchment decayed to dust in most parts of the world. Here, it survived. Inside those caves were biblical texts from centuries before Jesus was born, copied word for word the same way we have them today. That's not a coincidence. That's evidence of a copying tradition. So careful, so faithful to the original, that people separated by 2 millennia had the same text, amount 2,000 years, multiplied by caves preserved at near 100% fidelity, equals biblical text reliability confirmed. Results vary. But here's what most people miss about the scrolls. They weren't just scripture. They were the library of a religious community that lived in isolation, that rejected the official temple worship in Jerusalem, and that believed something transformative was coming. The scholars who wrote them understood they were living in a particular moment in history. The scrolls give us their voice, their expectation, their theologies. This is where it gets real. When you read the Gospels and they describe first-century Jewish life, the temple tax, the ritual purity laws, the way crowds moved, you're reading someone who knew that world intimately. Because we can verify it now. We have the coin, we have the pools, we have the synagogues. Most people skip over this part of the verification, but they shouldn't. Tel Dan is a mound of ancient ruins in the north of Israel. In 1993, archaeologists uncovered a stone slab with an inscription carved into it in Aramaic. The inscription mentioned a king of Israel and something remarkable, the House of David. That single phrase changed the conversation entirely. For years, some scholars had questioned whether David was even a real person. Myths grow around legendary kings. After all, oral traditions embellish. But there it was on stone, written by a foreign king, documenting a historical encounter with David's dynasty. The inscription was placed there in the 9th century BC, over a century after David's time, but it proves his family held power. It proves he was documented in foreign records. It proves the dynasty was real and significant enough to matter. That's not proof of every miracle or every claim, but it's proof that the core narrative, that David existed, that he was a king, that his house was known to neighboring powers, matches the historical record. Notice what's happening here. The Bible isn't being proven right on every detail. It's being grounded in reality. Jericho is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth. It's also one of the most debated sites in archaeology, because the question everyone asks is, did the walls really fall? The short answer is complicated. The longer answer reveals something about how we think about evidence. Yes, Jericho had walls. Yes, Evidence shows destruction, but the dating of which destruction layer matches the biblical conquest narrative is still contested. Different scholars point to different layers based on different dating methods. This is the part nobody notices, because it's not dramatic or final. The Bible describes events. Archaeology finds layers of debris. But matching which layer to which event requires assumptions and methodology. This doesn't mean the Bible is wrong. It means the connection between text and artifact is harder to prove than people want it to be. This feels small until you do the math. If you think archaeology is just about confirming what you already believe, you'll interpret ambiguous evidence to fit your narrative. If you think archaeology is about facts, you'll get frustrated when facts require interpretation. The truth is somewhere between. The city of David sits beneath modern Jerusalem. It's one of the most excavated sites in the world because every layer tells the story of occupation and reoccupation across 3,000 years. What archaeologists found there wasn't a single moment. It was a sequence. Small villages around 1000 BC. Then, evidence of a shift to fortified city. Then, evidence of a more centralized government. The timing aligns remarkably with the biblical narrative of a transition from tribal settlements to a unified kingdom. Is that proof? No. Is it a pattern that matches the text? Yes, and patterns matter when you're trying to understand history. Most people read past this. Here's where it gets interesting. 3 cities, Megiddo, Hazor, and Gezer, each have identical gates with identical architectural plans. One book of Kings describes King Solomon building fortifications in these exact cities. The gates are dated to the 10th century BC. Solomon's reign is traditionally dated to that same era. Every building with such a plan isn't necessarily from Solomon's time, because similar structures were built in later century. But the clustering of 3 identical gates in 3 cities mentioned in one specific biblical passage, all dated to one specific era, that's too specific to be coincidental. That's testimony in stone. Now pay attention to this part. The Sennacherib relief is an Assyrian monument carved into stone around 700 BC. It documents the siege of Lachish, a city in Judah. The relief shows siege ramps, siege towers, battering rams, and prisoners being led away. The Bible describes this same siege. Multiple sources, Assyrian, biblical, archaeological, all reference the same event. But here's what most people miss. The relief does not show the siege of Jerusalem. According to the Bible, Sennacherib's army approached Jerusalem but withdrew. According to Assyrian records, Sennacherib claimed he shut up Hezekiah like a bird in a cage, but he didn't take the city. That detail, the fact that Jerusalem survived when other cities fell, is documented in foreign records written by the very people trying to conquer it. Why would an Assyrian king exaggerate his success? He wouldn't. The survival of Jerusalem is confirmed by his silence about it. Assyrian campaign, approximately 46 cities claimed captured, multiplied by Jerusalem documented as not captured, equals external validation of biblical resistance. Results vary. This is the reset point. Most people think archaeology is about discovering what the Bible already said. But the real work is noticing what the evidence doesn't say, and what it confirms by omission. Hezekiah's tunnel is still there. You can walk through it. It's 500 meters long, carved through solid rock in the 8th century BC, delivering water into the city during times of siege. Inside that tunnel, carved into the stone, is an ancient Hebrew inscription left by the workers who dug it. The inscription describes how 2 teams started from opposite ends and dug toward each other, following the sound of picks hitting stone through the rock. When they met, they left a record. That inscription is written in Hebrew from the exact era described in Kings. The engineering feat is real. The language matches the period. The tunnel works. This isn't symbolic proof. It's engineering proof. But it's also evidence that a king had the resources, the vision, and the technical knowledge to execute a massive public works project during a time of international military threat. That king was Hezekiah. The Bible describes him doing exactly this. And there it is in the rock. Now here's where the mystery deepens. Silver scrolls were discovered in Jerusalem, and they contain the oldest biblical text ever found. They're older than the Dead Sea Scrolls by hundreds of years. They predate Jesus by century. They contain the priestly benediction, the blessing pronounced over the Jewish people in the temple. The text is so ancient, so carefully preserved, that it proves something about the nature of Jewish scripture copying. For centuries, maybe longer, communities copied these words exactly, word for word, letter for letter. That level of precision wasn't accident. It was discipline, it was reverence, it was intention, and it's documented in metal. Most people read past this, but it means the text you have now is far closer to the original than most ancient texts we possess. The gap between the oldest copies we've found and the modern text is thinner than we'd expect for any ancient document. Pontius Pilate was the Roman prefect of Judea during the time of Jesus. He's described in the Gospels with specific details about his role, his power, and his methods. For years, there was no archaeological evidence of Pilate outside the biblical text. Then, in 1961, a stone was discovered with an inscription in Latin. It bore Pilate's name and his official title. The inscription confirmed his historical existence and his administrative role. Later, a bronze ring was found bearing his name. Artifacts now exist that prove Pilate was a real historical figure in the exact place the Gospels say he was. That doesn't prove the Gospel narratives about what he did, but it proves he was there, and he had the power the Gospels describe. It proves the Gospel writers knew the geography, the politics, and the structure of Roman Judea with accuracy. That kind of accuracy suggests eyewitness knowledge or knowledge passed down from eyewitness sources. This is the part nobody notices. When every detail about the setting is correct, the narrative gains credibility, even where we can verify the narrative itself. Capernaum is a town on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. The Gospels describe Jesus teaching there, healing there, spending significant time there. Archaeologists excavated a house in Capernaum that shows evidence of being venerated as a sacred site as early as the middle of the 1st century AD. Early Christian pilgrims marked it. Early churches were built around it. The tradition of this being Peter's house where Jesus stayed goes back to the earliest layers of Christian memory. The house itself is from the 1st century. It matches the layout and construction of other houses from that era. It was treated as significant within decades of the time Jesus would have been there. That level of immediate, intentional preservation suggests something important happened in that specific space. The evidence doesn't prove Jesus was there, but it proves that early Christians believed so with enough certainty to preserve and mark the location within a generation. That kind of immediate memorial behavior has significance. Now here's the twist that changes everything. The Pool of Siloam was discovered in Jerusalem, and it's enormous. It's a massive mikvah, a ritual bathing pool from the time of Herod. The Gospel of John describes Jesus sending a blind man to the Pool of Siloam to be healed. The pool is real. The era is right. The function matches the description in the Gospel. But here's what most people don't realize. The pool was designed as a public space, a place where crowds gathered. It wasn't a remote sacred site. It was central to the city's water and ritual life. The Gospel's description of a blind man being sent there, being healed in public, being questioned by Pharisees, all of that makes sense given what we know about the pool's actual function and location. The story fits the geography. The story fits the practices. The story fits the social tensions of 1st century Jerusalem. That's not proof of the miracle itself, but it's proof that the Gospel writer knew the city, the customs, and the daily life of Jerusalem with remarkable accuracy. Most people skip over this because it doesn't feel like dramatic proof. But accumulating evidence of accurate details creates a kind of credibility that matters. Number of verifiable details about Jerusalem in Gospels, approximately 47 plus, multiplied by accuracy rate of archaeological confirmation, approximately 90% plus, equals narrative credibility through environmental precision. Results vary. This is where it gets real. The first temple was destroyed in 586 BC by Babylonian forces. The second temple was built after exile and rebuilt later by Herod. Herod's renovations were massive, so massive that the Temple Mount became one of the engineering wonders of the ancient world. The retaining walls he built are still standing. They're made of enormous stone blocks, some weighing hundreds of tons, fit together without mortar. The engineering precision is stunning. But here's the remarkable thing.